Welcome to From the Pool to the River, the epic journey from going to church to transforming nations with Chris Valentin.
Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions will serve and obey him. Okay, so this is what, we talked about the fact that the verse 26, it says, but the court will sit for judgment. And that word but is that defining that river Jordan, that new epic season. We have two epic changes here. In the verse 22, it says, I kept looking until the horn was waging war against the saints and overpowering them. And verse 22, until, everybody say until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was passed in favor of the saints. And then we look down at verse 26, but the court will sit for judgment. Those two, that until and that but, are defining times, changing seasons, if you're with me. Government is the structure that governors govern in, and that leadership is the art of governing. One more time. That government is the structure that governors govern in, and that leadership is the art of governing. Remember that? And then I said to you that there are three things. Government is the structure. There are three things that determine the structure. Three things that determine the structure. And the first one is, who's leading? Second one is, who are you leading? Third one is, what is the epic season that you're leading them in? Okay, and then I told you that whatever you misdiagnose, you will mistreat. So let's go back to practically, in a practical way. If you misdiagnose who's leading, like what are the gifts, callings, anointings of the people who are leading? If you misdiagnose who is leading, you will build a structure that doesn't cover your weaknesses and empower your strengths. One of the goals of good structure, good government, is that it would cover your weaknesses and empower your strengths. And the ultimate goal is in Isaiah 9, verse 6 and 7, that there will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace. So the goal of government is peace, and peace, shalom. Shalom doesn't just mean the absence of conflict. It means the presence of God. The presence of God, the increase of the presence of God comes as we develop structured government, if you will, that it covers our weaknesses and empowers our strengths. Did I say it right? Yes, I did. Are you with me? So, I said there's three things that you need to analyze, if you will, to develop good structure, good government. The first one is, who are you? When I say you, I'm not just talking about you as the leader, but I'm talking about your leadership team. What are the strengths and the weaknesses of your leadership team? Number two, who are you leading? Who are the people that you're leading? A great example of this is Paul Manwaring. I think he's probably one of the easiest examples of somebody who had a change, not so much in epic seasons and not so much in a change in, look at this. Before Paul came here, he was a prison governor in an English prison. Okay, who's leading? Paul and his team. Well, let's just pretend for a second that Paul was the only one leading, which wouldn't be true. But you take Paul. Paul's leading. What's the epic season? Epic season, maybe let's just say for a second, it's the same. But who is he leading? He's leading people who have to be controlled externally because they've proven to society that they cannot handle being controlled internally. Am I making sense? So the structure that a prison has is going to be, so Paul moves from being prison governor to being one of the leaders of this movement. Let's just say leader of our church, just as make it simple. How many of you know that if he doesn't re-diagnose who he's leading, are you following me? If he doesn't understand that, yes, he's the same person who's leading, so we have that right. Yes, it's the same epic season, let's pretend for a second it is. But if he doesn't realize that the people that he's leading are different than the people he led before, how many of you know that he's going to develop a structure to control instead of empower them? Okay, now, Let me give you one of the great, well, let me just finish this last part. Okay, so who's leading? That'd be you and your team. Who are you leading? That'd be the people who are following you. And the last part is the epic season. And of course, we're going to talk more about epic season, but what I want to develop in the first week or two is that different epic seasons require different governmental structures. Let me say it again. Different epic seasons require different governmental structures. One of the greatest examples of government structure that empowers or disempowers is our government, our American government. Our president is both president and he's commander-in-chief. Remember this? And we talked about that in a season when if we were ever attacked on our own borders, let's say the Russians, the Iranians, they actually attacked us on our own borders. Our forefathers looked into the future and they said, listen, democracy is a great government in a time of peace. But in a time of war, when our country's under siege, the democracy moves too slow to win a war. Are you following me? So follow me. We got the same governor. We have the President of the United States. Let's say we have George Bush, or we have, we have whoever your favorite president is. It doesn't matter how great a president we have, how much of a military general, how experienced a military general he would be, or the ability to run the military or win a war. It doesn't matter how anointed he is or she is in that office. If we didn't have martial law and the governmental structure did not change to empower a militaristic side of the governor, you can see that we couldn't win a war. Listen, that's such a great example of how important government is. Most of us think, oh, government, that's a boring subject. This is going to be, every time Chris comes in, this is going to be grueling. Listen, a lot of you are very gifted and anointed people, but the government that's been around you your whole life is keeping you from your purpose and destiny, and you don't even know it. I can't tell you how many churches that I go to that, and I think I may have given you this example, but it so fits for today as a reminder, that they'll have a pastor, we'll say a senior leader. They'll have a senior leader who's a pastor, a fivefold pastor. What is a pastor's strength? Relationship, typically loving people, oftentimes counseling people. I mean, a fivefold pastor's strength is in being in relationship with people, loving people, time spent, those kind of things. And they'll have a fivefold pastor and who will lead this church for 15, 20 years. And around that pastor emerges a government, kind of like they may have no intentions in paving a road to a certain place, but if you walk, we lived in the woods, and you could tell where the deer wanted to go because there was deer trails. Nobody intended to put roads there, but there were deer trails there. There was worn paths. Are you with me? Easy access for deer to go certain places. Well, those things happen naturally when you are in a place for a long period of time. So here we have worn paths where a pastor, a fivefold pastor leads, and maybe he leads for 10, 15, 20 years. And then let's say he retires. And they're like, what do they typically do? What do leaders typically do when their old pastor leaves? I can tell you what they typically do. They typically react to his weaknesses or her weaknesses, and they go, we need us a real visionary. Our old pastor loved people, and man, he married and buried, and he was always at the hospital, and he had us over for dinner, but he just didn't take us anyplace. We need someone that can dream. We need a visionary. We need someone who wants to touch the earth. Right? So they get this person in who's a visionary and who loves to he or she is thinking like world transformation. But what they don't realize is that this person is not very pastoral. This is a world transformation person, which is what they tried to get. They tried to get somebody who was different than the last person they had. Because when you with someone a long time, you know their weaknesses, and you're like, we're going to get, but you don't, what you tend to forget is their strengths. Because thankfulness is the least felt emotion in humanity. Do you know that? It's a true statement. Thankfulness, according to psychologists, is the least felt emotion in society. In other words, you have to cultivate thankfulness because it doesn't come easily. I was just reading a book that Todd, my personal assistant, gave me today. We've been doing a bunch of research because I'm going to write a chapter on apostolic eschatology. It's a victorious eschatology. Like the last days are going to be the most awesome days. And he just got me this book. Well, first he read this book for me and highlighted all the places that were. It's like 500-page book called The Improving State of the World. And then he just got me this book yesterday. It's called 100 Reasons Why the World's Improving. And I just was glancing at it today, and this book says that in the last century, the average life expectancy of the average human being on the planet has grown by 67%. So that in the 1900s, the average age of a person, the average life expectancy of a person was 28 to 32. Now, this is not a Christian book. The author said that Time magazine wrote that the difference in the life expectancy in 1 century could only be explained as miraculous. I just read it right before I came in here about an hour ago. What's the point? What do you hear on the news and politicians and what are they talking about? How bad things are getting. Infant mortality has improved by 700% in 100 years. 700%. SIDS, you know what SIDS is? It's a crib death syndrome. In 15 years, SIDS has improved by 300%. In other words, only 1/3 of the children die from SIDS that died only 15 years ago. What I'm getting at is this. Why don't we hear those statistics? Because thankfulness is not something that we cultivate. We cultivate a negative mental mentality. It's kind of like to stand up and say, America's doing pretty well. You'll get crucified for that. You have to have this like, okay, here's all the things that are wrong with our country. Now, how many of you know there's things wrong with our country? Come on. But the point is I'm talking about a mentality. It is normal to complain about your condition. No matter how good or bad it is normal to complain about your condition. I don't mean normal in God. I'm talking about normal in society. So all that to say that if we have a pastor who loves people and who visits people and but he's not a visionary, the next person we bring in is a visionary. And what we find out is two things. The first thing we find out is because we had a leader who was a pastor, we have no highways going to visionary. We have no governmental structure that, in other words, how is this visionary going to actually, do you understand that we're going to put this person in a governmental system that is immediately going to expose his weakness and constrain his strength? Because what's going to happen practically within the first 6 months? I can tell you, they're going to be like, Johnny visited us all the time, and Henry doesn't even care about us. You know what? He's been here 6 months, not invited me over his house one time. And you know what? And he doesn't even visit the hospital. Like Aunt Jody was in the hospital for 3 days, and Henry never visited her once. This guy, he can't win. There's no way that he's going to be able to be victorious, that he's going to be able to be successful in that governmental structure. Why? It was built around a pastor who's highly relational. And he is a visionary and not very relational. The Vineyard used to have a church plant model, which they still may have. And in that church plant model, they said this is the way they planted churches. They would send a couple, like a husband and wife or a few people, into a city. They would start a prayer meeting in their house, and they would pray and have like a home group. When that home group got to 50 people, then they would rent a building and they would begin public meetings. How many of you know that if you put your average apostle in a home group and expect them to grow it to 50 people, that they're never going to get big enough to have public meetings? Because the typical apostle is not highly relational. It's highly visionary and missionary oriented. Are you following me? So the nature of those churches that survive is they survive being churches of 50, 60, and 70 people because they're led by fivefold pastors, and apostles never emerge in that kind of a church plant culture because they can't get past the 50 people. The first level of requirement. Am I making any sense to you at all? You're giving me that look. I guess that's a processing look, right? Because their strength isn't in relationship, they can't grow a home group to 50 people consistently to go get a public building so that they can cast vision for the world. And it's a little bit difficult when you're in a cell group situation and the cell group just naturally says, hey, we're all friends. We know you really well. It's a little bit hard. It's a little bit difficult to stand behind a pulpit with 30 people in your living room. I don't know if you know what I'm saying. I mean, take Pastor Bill. He's amazing. Put Bill in a home group setting. And by nature, he's quiet. He's going to defer to other people. Put him behind a pulpit and he becomes Superman. Why? Because, when Bill thinks about revival, what does Bill think about? I can tell you, we have these meetings. When Bill thinks about revival, he thinks about lots of meetings where you preach and pray for people and signs and wonders and miracles happen. In a building where people come to get healed. Why? Because that structure plays to his strength. His strength is get people in a building, lay hands on them, equip them, teach them how to pray for each other. That's his strength. Put Bill in a structure that requires a high level of relationships to succeed, and what are you doing? You're exposing, you're making him somebody he's not. On the other hand, put Dan Fairley or Danny Silk or Paul in a structure that requires lots of relationship, and you've created a structure where they can succeed. Put Dan behind a pulpit with 5,000 people in Africa, and you've set him up to fail. It's not his strength. That's not what he was built to do. It's not that, you understand what I'm getting at. So what I'm saying is this, is that how important is structure? It's huge. Because it doesn't matter who you are. If you're in a wrong governmental structure, you won't succeed. That may be too strong because God can always, where we're weak, God's strong. But the point is that government is so important because government is what either uncovers you or empowers you. So it's very important that you know who are you, who is your team, who are these people. The second thing is, who are these people we're leading? Now, let me just drop back for just a second because I feel like the Holy Spirit's kind of wooing me to remind you. When I say who's leading, and I'm talking about your team, I'm also talking about your God. If you misdiagnose your God, then you will reduce what you do down to what you can do instead of what He can do. Man, that's pretty huge right there. If you build a government just around man, then you'll just have a government that actually plans God out of your structure. In other words, you'll create a structure that's all about you being in control. And remember, He's called King of Kings, which means He wants to be the king of all those who are in control. So it's very important that you know who God is. Because whoever God is to you, He will be through you. Listen, if you don't know who God is to you, He can't be it through you. God can be this big. Well, this example. God is this big, but we can reduce Him through our governmental structure to this. We can create enough rules where the Holy Spirit has no room to move at all. Why? Because we intentionally built a governmental structure around who we are forgetting that He is part of who we are. How many churches do you know of that they've done this amazing, it's like a great business, like they've diagnosed themselves really well, but they left God out. And so, Bill says this all the time, and I do too. It's like, if signs and wonders and miracles don't happen in your church, then just take down the word church. I don't mean that rudely at all. I mean, there are great humanitarian efforts that aren't churches. But the word church should be synonymous with another dimension. So I'm saying, please don't call it a church, because then you create wrong expectations for people. Or you lower the expectation by calling it a church. It's kind of like if you said, I have a service station, but you really don't give service. Just call it a gas station. Because, let's say that there's no one manning the pumps. There's no one to help you. There's no one to do anything for you. That's not a service station. That's a gas station. Is there anything wrong with a gas station? No, but don't confuse terminology by saying this is a service station when what it really is a gas station. The only service that happens is when you get out of the car and serve you. Are you following me? So don't call it a church if it doesn't have anything to do with God being able to invade humanity. You can't call that a church, because that's what the word church means. The Greek word church means called out ones. So, if you're not called out ones, then please don't sell yourself like that. Because you give the word church, you redefine it to people. And unfortunately, it's so redefined that people begin to expect a governmental system that doesn't allow for God to do anything. They have an hour service, and you go, okay, where's God come in here? Well, God doesn't come in anywhere because we created a structure in which we planned God out. Nobody would say that in church. No one says, we plan to keep God out. That's ridiculous. What they do is they plan to keep man in charge of every minute. And in doing that, man, this is probably really insightful right now what I'm saying. I've never said this before, but I'm just seeing this. No pastor would ever say, we don't want God to come. They just wouldn't. And if you said, listen, you plan God out of your services, they would say, the average pastor's going to say, well, that's crazy. We ask God to come every Sunday. We ask God to come every Wednesday. We ask God to come every time we're together. We pray that your kingdom come. We pray that all the time. It's like, okay, you prayed that, but let me show you something. You've developed a governmental structure. Now show me where your God structure is. Where does God get to be involved here? Show me. What you're going to find out is that mostly unintentionally, or mostly by misdiagnosing who God is, there's the second part. See, my God, some people have a God who would never do anything that they wouldn't do. Now, I'm not being sarcastic right now. I'm talking about government. I really am. We say this sarcastically, and we're trying to tease people into getting it. But right now I'm saying a whole bunch of people have a God who wouldn't do anything they wouldn't do. So they think, okay, what would I do if I was God? And then they develop a governmental structure around what they would do if they were God, not realizing that they're not. So they don't go through the Bible and go, wow, look how God came here and here and here. And well, that's different than what I would do. So I wonder how we make room for that. How do we make room? How do we actually develop a structure where God can be free to come? Are you with me? So the three things. Who's leading? That has to include God if you're a believer. Who are you leading? Who are these people that you're leading? Are they broken people? I was in a meeting recently with one of our pastors who we sent recently to another place. And this person really loves street ministry, and when he was with us here, he developed street ministry and took people out in the streets and had classes for people to learn how to reach out in the streets, and so we were having this conversation in my office, and I said to him, listen, you have to understand that the people you're leading where you're at and the people you were leading when you were here are not the same people. See, when I went to your church a year ago, what I saw is a church like this is a MASH unit. They're all hurting, broken, relationally destroyed people. That's who you're leading. And you are trying to get them to be an army. But all of your soldiers are in the MASH unit. And we were talking about that. I said, do you understand what your soldiers need is they need tools to get well. You're trying to teach them how to use a rifle, and they're telling you, my leg's shot off. I've taken a bullet to the head. They don't, listen, and I said to him, they don't care about your city because their kids aren't getting along. Their kids are on drugs. They don't get along with each other. Their life is in shambles. They've been off of drugs for 3 months. And you're saying, let's win a city, and they haven't taken their own land internally. You're trying to get people to have a victory externally when they haven't had one internally. And so I said, the next several months, I said, just take 12 months and take people through the Gospels. Let's take John chapter 1 and say, we're going to go through John chapter 1 this week, and next week we're going to do John chapter 2. And I said, and take all the passages that are about relationships and getting well and forgiveness and all those things that we're supposed to learn when we're youngsters in God. Take those things and visit those things because you are trying to create an army with people who are actually in the medical ward. And so he's like, oh, that's really good. So we talked about that. We talked about, like, you have misdiagnosed your people, and you're frustrated because you're measuring success by the fact that you're measuring or success or failure by how many people go out with you into the streets. These people can't get out of the streets because they can't get out of the hospital. And he just kind of looked at me and he's like, wow, why didn't I think of that? Well, sometimes you can't think of it because you're too close to the problem, and somebody has to stand back and go, "Whoo, yeah, you can say you got 3 healthy people in this church, and you can minister to 3 healthy people." And sometimes I've heard people say, this is pretty common actually, God has reduced us to our strength. Gideon's army. God has reduced us to our strength. I'm like, yeah, well, that's why it's you and your wife and 2 children. There's only one Gideon in the Bible. No, if you know what I mean. There's only one time when God said, sin less. Unless you take Joshua. There's probably a couple times. But you know what I'm getting at. Lots of times people were outnumbered, but we have a whole bunch of churches that all think they're Gideon's army. Like God said, we need to be smaller. It's like people left because God sent them away. No, people left because they don't like you. People don't like revival. No, they don't like you. That's different. Jesus said, if you're persecuted for my name's sake, but when you get persecuted for yours, there's no credit for that. No, it's the truth. I would say in America, 7 times out of 10, Christians are persecuted for their name's sake. They're persecuted because they do stupid things in the name of God, and then people don't like them, and they're like, people don't like God. No, they just don't like you. You behaved completely dishonorably. Nobody would like you for that. No one's going to like you if you stand up in some place and start preaching to people and telling them they're going to hell. No one's going to. That isn't called persecution. It's just called stupidity. That was a good word, actually. So it is really, really important that those 3 things, we have a handle on those 3 parts. And we could actually spend weeks on each one. Who is leading? First of all, we could spend weeks on who is God. Like, who is God? And we're learning about that. That's an unfolding revelation. But every time we learn more about God, we learn more about us. Follow me for a minute. Because I was made in His image and His likeness, every time I see new things about Him, I can't help but see new things about me because I am made in a direct reflection of who He is. So every time I learn more about Him, I learn more about me. Every time I learn more about me, and when I say me, I'm talking about me like us. When I learn more about us, how many of you know that every revelation demands a new government? If I have a revelation and don't change the government, then I will still be reduced to functioning in the old revelation that I had. Let me say it again. If I realize that God is also this, then I didn't know that. And then once I realize that God is also this, like let's just make it really simple. This would be really easy for us. We go, oh, I realize that signs and wonders and miracles and let's say gifts of the Spirit are for today. Whew, revelation. I didn't know that yesterday. Whew, I know it today. And suddenly I go, God is the God of miraculous and God does miracles in all seasons. The next thing I see is, oh, and Jesus said, greater works will you do. The revelation that God does miracles is followed by a revelation right after that I do miracles. Okay, that's all great, fine, right? But if I allow no time, let's just use services. I hate just using services because it reduces us down to 2 hours a week doing something. But just for the sake of illustration, if I realize that God is a miracle working God, and then I come to realize that He said, greater works will you do, but I give no time in my service for God to do works, how many know that I'm still reduced to yesterday's revelation? Even though I have new revelation, because I haven't developed new structure, I'm actually reduced to yesterday's revelation. We had a governmental structure at Bethel Church that was out of the 50s. I think our last revision on our bylaws, which is a manifestation of our government, I think the last revision was somewhere in the 60s. It might have been early 70s. I don't remember, but I think that was the last revision. So let's just say it was mid-70s. Still, 30 years old at least, right? And it was built, our bylaws were built around the revelation that we are sinners saved by grace. Remember I said, who's leading? Who are you leading? Okay, think about this. If I believe that I'm the pastor, I'm the leadership team. There's 10 of us. And we're leading these people who we believe are sinners saved by grace. In other words, we're missing one little element in there. What is that? Saved by grace, they become what? Saints. So we missed that one little tiny piece that we're learning is a big old huge piece. So our governmental structure was built in this day that said we are sinners saved by grace. Okay, what's the problem with that? A sinner is a professional whose nature it is to do wrong. How empowering are you going to be? In Danny's word, make me look like a genius for empowering people who are prone to do wrong. Did that make any sense? In other words, if I believe that you are a sinner, and I'm talking about in the true sense, like your nature is really still evil. If I believe that, I'm the leader, I believe that. I have a responsibility from God to present you as close as possible as a leader, spotless and wrinkle-free. That's part of what we do as leaders. Well, if I believe that you are prone to do the wrong thing, I have to develop a governmental structure that takes away your ability to make choices, because I have already said in my core value of you, if I give you a chance to make choices, you'll make the wrong ones. So guess who's going to be in charge of this flock? Guess who's going to do all the thinking for this flock? Yeah, I'm going to develop a structure where I think and you listen and do what I tell you. Just consider what I'm going to be teaching you. Consider, more importantly, how I'm going to be teaching you. I'm not going to teach you how to think. I'm going to teach you what to think. Why? Because I've already predetermined that your nature is that you want to do what's wrong, and it's my job to get you there with as few sins as possible. We had a governmental, so let me just finish this part. So we had a governmental system that disempowered our people and totally empowered a few people. Well, why? Because that would be the natural outcome of a belief system. Now, can you see that government actually emerges from a belief system about who's leading, who are you leading, and the season you're leading them in. Listen, you may not even know that. Like you may go, wow, it's a huge revelation. I've never heard that. No, all I did is articulate what you already practice. Let me say that again. That may sound revelatory. You already practice it. You may not have been able to share it like that. You may not have said, well, let me give you some real heavy revies here. Who's leading, who you're leading, and the season you're leading them in is how you develop structure. No, you may not have been able to put it into words, but you do it every day. You do it naturally every day. Are you following me? So we went back 2.5, 3 years ago, and we said, hey, first of all, do you notice that we're not operating inside of our bylaws? Hey, has anybody noticed that our bylaws say we're supposed to do this, this, and this, and we don't do that? Which is like not really good. Yeah. Well, did you notice that our bylaws were written in a different revelation of our people? In other words, here's what I'm getting at. The more revelation, every time you get a new revelation of who's leading, which includes God, or who you're leading, or the epic season you're leading them, if you don't change, if the government isn't a wineskin that is, it says he pours new wine into new wineskins. What's a new wineskin? It's current, new, and it's flexible. What's the point? We're always in an emerging wineskin. Let me say that again. The only kind of government that is a God government is an emerging wineskin. It has to be a wineskin that is meant to grow. If you make policies that are rigid and dogmatic, I guarantee you that what's empowering today will be a prison tomorrow. You have to be constantly in the state of, hey, we learned this. Are we doing something about that? Like, did we build a road to there? Hey, we learned that God's over here too, but we don't have any road from here to there. We don't even have a walking trail. And sometimes where you have a 2-lane road, you need an 8-lane freeway. Because the revelation, it wasn't that you had a different revelation, but it's that you had a deeper revelation of the same revelation, and there's more people going that direction, and you need a more of a structure. For instance, let's just say healings for today. Great revelation, right? That was a revelation at one point in church history. Healings for today. Oh, hey, we're supposed to equip the saints to do the work of service. Whoa, wait a second. We went from the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher, or probably in those days we'd say the pastor, the teacher, and the evangelist. I'm just like, there was a season where it was basically threefold ministry. We go, pastor, teacher, and evangelist doing all the work. You need to get saved, you come to the evangelist, right? And then we go, okay, healings for today. Oh, good. The pastor, the teacher, and the evangelist are going to do healing. Then someone goes, hey, this says equip the saints. Okay, suddenly, we got a 2-lane road to healing. People can come and get healed. They really can come and get healed. They can come and get delivered. And then we go, wait a second. I think we've been misreading this. I think the evangelist, the pastor, and teacher, let's say the threefold ministry at the time, I think they're supposed to be teaching the saints how to do it. It seems to me it's the saints who are supposed to be doing the works. And it seems to me that the pastor, the teacher, and evangelist are supposed to be training them to do the work. Well, what happened? All of a sudden we go from, let's say in an average church of 200 people, we have 5 people doing the work of ministry, to now we have 200 people doing the work of ministry. Do you think you're going to get through on that same little road? No, because where is the work of ministry normally happening in a threefold ministry church pre the saints do the ministry? In the church. Well, what is the first thing that happens when you start to empower the people in the church? And you go, you guys are supposed to be doing the work. What have they seen? All the ministry happens where? In the church. So what do they want to do? Everyone in the church wants to get on the what? Ministry teams or on the staff. And so you got 200 people on staff and you're trying to get everyone healed in 2 hours. Can you see that the governmental system has created some congestion? If you went to a prophetic church 15 years ago, it meant that people got up on Sunday mornings and came to the mic and prophesied. Some of the older people, come on, you know what I'm saying, right? It meant that you go, I go into a prophetic church. immediately you had a picture. Oh, people prophesy from the mic on Sunday mornings. That's a prophetic church. And then all of a sudden you go, you may all prophesy. Dude, we are going to have some long services. Are you flowing with me? What happens is that because we have new revelation and our government doesn't change, we're trying to accommodate a new revelation with old government, and what we end up with is congestive, narrow roads trying to get tons of people to pass. And we don't realize with new revelation needs to come new government. There's no possible way that if you empower 3,000 people that are in this church, if you empower those people and empowerment looks like it did 15 years ago, you're not going to have time to preach, and you're still going to have 2,995 people frustrated. Well, I can't get on the team. He doesn't think I can't qualify. I'm disqualified. What do I have to do to get on the team? You're on the team when you receive Jesus. You're a royal priesthood. You're on the team. I need to be in the ministry. One of these days I want to be in the ministry. You're in the ministry. Well, how can I be in the ministry? You can understand what they're trying to say, because what's been modeled for them for 100 years is ministry happens in 2 hours. What they're trying to say to you is, how do I get to be one of the people who minister in the 2 hours? It's a legitimate question for people coming out of an old season. And what do you have to do as leaders? You have to rebuild the government. You have to tear down that government, and you have to rebuild it. Mr. Gorbachev, let's tear down these walls. You know, this is a true story. In communist Russia, when the Beatles, some of the older folks will appreciate this more than the younger folks, because you don't realize that the Beatles created an epic transition. In my opinion, originally God, epic transition. I don't mean that they were anointed by God. No, I don't mean they were Christians. I mean that they were anointed by God to create a different epic season, and it went bad. Agreed, it went bad. But there was something happening, and the Russian government made Beatles albums illegal. The only way you could get a Beatles album in 1965, 66, and 67 is through the underground. You paid about $50 in those days, which you can imagine how much that would be in our day, $400 or $500 in Russian money. Hardly anyone could afford it. You know why? Because the Russian government said, if they hear the Beatles records, they'll know that there are happy people in the world. They'll be disillusioned with our government, and they'll overthrow us. So they made Beatles albums illegal. But what happened? Technology changed so that we started beaming radio signals over the wall. The wall couldn't keep radio out. And people started singing Beatles songs that were coming over the radio. It's part of the reason why the wall fell, believe it or not. I'm talking about secular press says that one of the reasons the wall fell was because of the Beatles. Because people in Russia didn't understand that there were happy people in the world. And when they heard the Beatles singing happy songs, you know, I want to hold your hand, I saw her stand. Those were mindset, you know, the prophet, Isaiah 42. It's a great example. The former things that come to pass, behold, I proclaim new things, sing to the Lord a new song. Well, he wasn't singing it to the Lord. I'm not trying to exaggerate that point. But they were singing a new song. They were bringing in an era of joy. They've come out of 2 world wars. And the Russians said, we let people know that people are happy in the world, and they're going to overthrow us. Do you see what I'm getting at? And finally, George Bush said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down these walls. I don't know how many of us feel like we need to do that in our churches. Please, Pastor, tear down these walls. Let our people go free. You have misdiagnosed our people. You have misdiagnosed the season that we're in. You have misdiagnosed our God. You have misdiagnosed our leaders. Can you see what I'm getting at? See, can you see how important it is? Like, you've got to ask yourself, have I developed a structure around me that is totally limiting to me? Or probably less self-serving than that. Have I developed a structure around the people, my family, the people God's put me in influence with? Have I developed a structure around them that has disempowered them? Or how about this? Uncovered them. Remember, Noah got drunk and got naked. Now, God's not saying that's okay, but his son Ham comes in and sees his dad naked and runs out and says to his brothers, look at our dad, that guy's crazy. He's in there drunk, naked. And his brothers know something about honor. They take a blanket and they go backwards into the, tent or whatever their dad was. I think it was a tent. And they covered their father's nakedness. Consequently, do you know why the Canaanites got driven out of their land? Because they were the sons of Ham. And Noah said when he woke up out of his drunkenness, he said to Ham, you exposed me, and a curse will be on your people, and they will be slaves in the land of promise. Do you know why Joshua was instructed to kill everyone in Canaan, and anybody who wouldn't leave gets killed or gets enslaved? Because Ham uncovered his father's nakedness. He told the truth about his father, listen to this, out of season. Bad government uncovers people out of season. Now, how many know there's a difference between a covering and a cover-up? When you read the Bible through gang core values, it's all about cover-ups. And loyalty says, if you narc on us, you are an infidel. You are not of us. No, what they're not talking about covering. They're talking about cover-ups. There are seasons to confront and there are seasons to cover. Part of what you need to learn as a great leader is when to cover and when to confront. You need to learn that. And maybe most importantly, how to confront. How to confront. Because if you confront with intentionally to expose, be careful. Watch out. And get this, your governmental structure can unknowingly uncover people that need to be covered. You're thinking, aren't you? See, part of what your governmental structure is supposed to do is cover your weaknesses and expose your strengths. Now, you'll notice I intentionally didn't use the word sins. I didn't say cover your sins. I said cover your weaknesses. Sins need to be confronted in the right season. Wow. This is so what the Holy Spirit's doing right now. It's really powerful. I don't know if you can feel it. I'm not saying that we've drawn some good conclusions, but what I will say is I feel the Holy Spirit asking some really powerful questions. I'm talking about personally, as I'm teaching. I can feel the Holy Spirit saying, have you uncovered people? Is the structure around you empowering the person I said you were? I've used this many times. I love this. I even think about it often, many times a month, that statement that Allison made, where she said, I love to listen to other people's prophecies. I said, why? She says, because then I treat them not as they are, but as God sees them. Can you see the word treat there can be interpreted govern? I govern people the way God sees them. What happens? I build highways into their destiny. Instead of a drawbridge that goes up because listen, you can't come in here. You need 42 more sozos. You have a drawbridge and just no, you can't come in here. How many know there are times that we have to say to people, I'm sorry, you can't. Just on the phone last night with a world leader. And, they had to ask some people to leave their church. After, we walked with them. I wasn't a part, I just was the part of the council from a distance, and they're like, are we making good decisions? Well, if you get somebody who's contagious and begins to contaminate everyone else, at some point you have to say, okay, we need to quarantine you for a season. In Danny's words, until you're fun to be with. Because right now, not only you're not fun to be with, but you're biting and scratching everyone else. So there are times to restrict people. See, if leadership was easy, everyone would be a leader. It's the hard decisions that create great leaders. Despite what the media thinks, being a leader is not that simple. There are times when the facts that the people know, what the people know would require me to give freedom to that person. But I know things that they don't know. And now, how am I going to build a structure around them that intentionally restricts them because of what I know? Well, I can do that pretty simply, but if I have a fear of the people, then in order to build a structure around them that contains this person for a season, I expose them so that I can say to the people, look, I'm making good decisions. This is the decision you would make if you had all the facts. So here's the rest of the facts. Whoo-hoo. Be careful, because you may have gave them the facts and settled the crowd and angered your God. I have to decide, when is there time to uncover? And sometimes, and I said to this leader yesterday, actually, this has been going on for a while. It was actually 2 weeks ago that I made this statement to this person. I said, you have to ask your people if they trust you. And you have to say to them, there are facts that I know about this case, and there are facts that I will know about cases in the future, that I cannot tell you the facts, because if I do, I will have to uncover the person. I will satisfy your conscience, and in satisfying your conscience, I will expose these people's faults, weaknesses, and sins. How would you like to come into my office, and I'm counseling you, and you tell me about your lifelong struggle with whatever? Let's say you come into my office and you say, man, I just have a real struggle with pornography, and it's about children, and I've had it all my life, and I'm working with you, but you're a nursery worker, and I have to take you out of the nursery because I'm putting you in harm's way. And I have to say to you, you can't work in the nursery anymore until I feel and you feel like there's a strength in this area. It's just dumb to have somebody struggling with childhood pornography in the nursery. Now, how am I going to explain that to other people? How about if Johnny doesn't like the fact that I restricted him? He's like, I've never touched a kid, and I would never do it. I have all these things protected. I'm like, Johnny, I just don't feel good about you being in there. And he leaves frustrated. He's like, it took me out of the nursery. But he doesn't bother to tell everyone why he got taken out of the nursery. Of course. You wouldn't tell him if it was you. I wouldn't tell him if it was me. And so what are you going to do? Are you going to defend yourself? Because only one way you're going to be able to really defend yourself to satisfy all the people who don't already trust you. Right? You may not even tell them the problem. You just may say, I have some facts that you don't know about him and children. Well, people aren't stupid. People aren't stupid. They know what you just said. In fact, they may make it worse. They may think that he has a record, that he molested children already, or she molested children already, when the thing is the temptation is all he's dealt with or she's dealt with. But you just made a big ol'. Okay, let me throw them under the bus so I look great. Are you following me? And sometimes you have to ask your people, do you trust me? Well, yes, I do. Okay, then you have to trust that I'm making the right decision. If you had all the facts that you would make this decision, or that at least you would think it was a good option. Maybe you wouldn't choose option A, but you would at least go, that is one option. Right now, it looks like a really stupid decision, and do you know me to be stupid? Well, yeah, you haven't been the brightest person I've ever followed. Okay, if you really feel that way, I would suggest you find another leader that you respect then. They go, no, Chris, you've been, actually, every time I've known the facts, you've made good decisions, mostly good decisions. I go, okay, and this decision right now from a distance looks like a really stupid one, doesn't it? Well, yes, it does. So then can you surmise that there's probably things you don't know? You see what I'm getting at? So you can build a governmental structure to expose people and then wonder why all your children are being driven out of the promised land. You threw them under the bus to save your butt. And you know what? You had success today, but what did that cost you? Because today's solutions are often tomorrow's problems. Leaders, are you hearing me? You have to make hard decisions. It's not always easy. People don't always like you because you've decided that you will cover people's weaknesses and you will empower their strengths. And sometimes it makes you popular in certain seasons, and sometimes it makes you misunderstood. And sometimes you have to stand in the storms of misunderstanding and keep your mouth shut. And you have to take it on the head because you have chosen to cover people in their storms and to stand by them in hard times. That's not always easy. Just remember that there are times when you need to shut your mouth. You look around and your leader looks like he made a really bad decision, or your leaders, or he or she, a political leader, it can be your church leader, it can be your city leader, made a really bad decision. You got to remember, you don't know all the facts. The nature of leadership is that you are privy to information that other people don't have. And if you get that political spirit on you, I guarantee you won't make good decisions. The one thing I love about George Bush, whether you like his policies, I don't like everything he's done. Listen, from a distance, I don't. I don't even know. He might have made every single decision I would make. I have no idea because I didn't know the facts of the time. But I would guess that there's some things that he did that I would maybe do different. But what I do like about him is it doesn't feel like he's motivated by the crowd. And I like that. And I think that is a core value I can live with. I can live with somebody who's integrous in his heart with his convictions and his God. I can live with that. Even though I may not make those decisions, I am a lot more comfortable with someone who stays to their convictions than someone who does what the crowd wants them to when it's unpopular. That makes me really nervous. I never know what people like that are going to do because they're not operating out of core values. They're operating out of a political spirit, and that scares me. And even though I may completely and totally disagree with that person's decision, I'm more comfortable with them as a person because I know I'm getting the real deal. We're over here, I don't know what I'm getting. I mean, I can lead like that. Let's just poll everybody on every single issue. And if it's 51-49, I do what the 51 want. I mean, that's not being a leader. There is a difference between a democracy and a theocracy. I mean, who's leading you, the people or God? That's a question you have to ask yourself because you're going to build a governmental system out of who you think's leading you. I'll build a government by the people for the people. Okay, that's great. It's a great democracy. It's not a great theocracy. What you're basically saying is the people rule. How many know the people need to have power? They need to co-reign. You can't disempower the people because God said they're a royal priesthood. On the other hand, you can't disempower God. So you live in this tension of developing a government that both empowers God and empowers the people and honors the leaders. Boy, that's the challenge, isn't it? Think about what I just said. You got to honor the leaders, empower the people, and make sure that God ultimately rules. It's just a simple thing. Not that easy, is it? I mean, it's easy to talk about. I can write anything on a whiteboard and get you to applaud it, but it's like, okay, how do we do that? And do we ever get out of balance? Sure we do. Do we ever give too much power to the people and disempower God? Sure we do. If we watch over our heart so that we don't fear man, like we don't let that grow in our heart, even if we're out of balance and even if we let the people rule this time because, for whatever reason, but we didn't do it out of fear, how many know that you can make a bad decision, God can still make it good? Because you did it with the right heart. You did it for the right reasons. Is there ever a time when we listen to God too much is the wrong way to say this. Is there ever a time that we send a really loud message to the people like God tells us what to do and we don't care what you think? You think that's the right attitude? No, I'm saying there's some of you are like, I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, think about it. If the government of God isn't both vertical and horizontal, then that creates a completely no accountability. All I have to do is stand up every time you disagree and say, well, God told me. Well, God told me to do that. Well, God told me to do that too. I mean, what kind of argument are you going to have, David? If I say God told me, I mean, what are you going to say? I'm saying the government has to be horizontal and vertical. Has to be both. There has to be accountability. I have to be able to say, are you sure God said that? I'd like to judge that word. I'd like to make sure that was the Lord who spoke that to you. How many know that I believe leaders should be powerful, but I don't think they should be all powerful. There's a difference between being powerful and being all powerful. Okay, now we'll probably stop there and let you ask questions, and are you learning anything at all? It's helpful. Okay. Let me ask you a question. Go ahead, Steve. You can hand Chris the mic, but don't talk yet. How many of you, before you came in here, governmental stuff is like not your deal? You're like, kind of boring. Raise your hand. Oh, most everyone. Sheesh. How many of you are getting some interest that didn't have interest before? Oh, good. That's encouraging. So if nothing else, at least I stimulate your thinking. Okay, Chris, go ahead.
One of the questions I had it like right in the beginning when you started talking about government. Because you read in Revelations how it said that John was an apostolic leader over 7 geographic regions.
Yes.
And then
that was last session.
Yeah. And that we're going into this apostolic age.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, if we're going into this apostolic age, are we coming into an age where we're going to have key apostolic leaders over geographic regions? Like I can already see as we say, almost like Bill has an apostolic leader over Reading or something like that. And I just don't know how does that work with the whole government structure of, accountability, but you have a geographic leader who governs his geographic region.
Okay, well, let me say this. I think that there are apostles over geographic regions, and I think there are apostles over demographic. Okay, for instance, Paul his main apostleship was not per city, even though he did tell the Corinthians that he was their father. But in the bigger view, if you step back a little further with the camera, with the wide angle, he was actually an apostle to the Gentiles. And Peter, an apostle to the Jews, right? So their apostolic authority wasn't so much geographic as it was a demographic. It was a people group. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So remember that the key element of apostles is that they're cultural transformers. They may not be a transformer of the city. Maybe they're a transformer of the arts. So what is their geographic region? Well, it can't be defined on a map, but it can be defined in an industry. Does that make sense?
It makes tons of sense.
Okay.
And one of my other questions about that was when, say, there's an area, for instance, I'll just go with Todd Bentley in Abbotsford. Todd doesn't, I guess, recognize himself as an apostle. He says it all the time. First and foremost, I'm an evangelist and all these things. So how does that work in other areas of the world where there isn't an apostolic leader for the church there? Does it go down to the prophet is next? Does it go down to the evangelist is next to lead over the area?
That's a good question. And I would say because we're in transition, this is the way I see it practically working right now. I would say that your last rendition of how structure works is probably true right now. So I would say that, what's happening is if there's no apostle over an area, a demographic or whatever, then what you're seeing is that mostly pastors. What I see is mostly it drops to pastors. When I say drop, I just mean anointing level wise. That mostly what we see is pastors in those geographic areas. So it goes from, I don't see too many prophets in those areas. What I see is a lot of, in Hollywood and in the arts. I take this the way I mean it, and let me explain it before you come to a conclusion. I see a lot of false prophets leading the demographic of the arts and the media. Now, I don't mean antichrist, people who stand up and, I mean people who are deceived. The New Age and the occult have really stolen that whole demographic, the whole Hollywood media demographic. So, and what I see is that we're trying to win that area with pastoral lid, and they have a prophetic and apostolic lid leading that. So there's an overpowering of anointings in that arena, and what we're going to see in the next few years is we're going to see prophets and apostles sent into that demographic because we don't have that right now. So where do I think we're going? I think we'll have apostles at the top of each mountain eventually. But are we there? No, because we're in we're closing one season, we're opening another. So we're kind of like in the Gospels. The Gospels, I told you this, but the Gospels are Old Testament till the last few pages, last few chapters. So Jesus is actually living. The Gospels mostly Old Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, mostly Old Testament. So Jesus is living in the Old Covenant and proclaiming the New. We actually are doing the same. Like, we're actually not living in Old Covenant, but we're living in an old epic season, and we're ushering in, and that old epic season would be denominationalism, which we talked a little bit about, but are going to explain a lot more as we go on. We're leaving an old system called denominationalism, and the denominationalism isn't just a religious system, by the way. I want to propose to you that denominationalism is the main reason why we have wars. So you think when I'm talking about denominationalism, I'm talking about Baptist, Assembly of God, Vineyard. I'm talking about a way of thinking where people divide because they don't agree. That system, let me just give you a little example real quickly of it'll come about in the last days the mountain of the house of the Lord be established as chief of the mountains, and we raise up out of the hills. The last days is the phrase I want to pick up there. It'll come about in the last days. That the mountain of the house of the Lord. So you're picturing this authority rising, right? And it goes on to talk about people will stream to it. They'll come and say, let's come to the mountain. But let me just go down to the last part. And they will say, teach us concerning his ways, that we may walk in his paths. Now here's really interesting. For the law will go forth from Zion. Remember how in the book of Daniel it says that he tried to make alterations in times and in the law. And I told you that the word law is not capitalized because he's not talking about the law of Moses. Well, here it says, and we will walk in his paths. For the law, not capitalized again, for the law shall go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between nations, make and render decisions between many peoples. They will hammer their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. And listen to this. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. In Jesus' day, what was the epic season? There will be wars and rumors of wars. But what does he say about this last of the last days? And never again will they train for war. Why? Why? Because the mountain of the house of the Lord will become chief of the mountains. What happens when the mountain of the house of the Lord? He will teach us his ways. He'll teach us his ways, we'll walk in his paths, and what will happen next? They will render decisions between many peoples. They will render decisions between many peoples. And after they do that, what happens? They bleat all the cuss words out of their messages. They hammer their swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. Obviously the point there is not that they're using pruning hooks or plowshare. The point is that they're taking things that were destructive and now they're building them into constructive things. Why? Because someone stepped in and began to make decisions between people. What was the result? The result is they never again trained for war. I want to propose to you that religion starts wars, but God stops them. Can you see the transition that we're going through? In denominationalism, people divide. Wars start over philosophies and over religious ideologies. But this season says the mountain of the house of the Lord is going to grow, make decisions between people, and the result of that is people go from being destructive to constructive, and they don't train for war anymore. I'd say that's an epic shift. That's an epic shift from going from wars to rumors of war to never again will they train for war. Is this true that there'll be wars and rumors of wars in the last days? Well, of course, Jesus said that. But he also said here, in the last days, that they will render decisions between many people and never again will they train for war. Well, which one's true? Both. What's the difference? Epic seasons. If you're president over here, you're president of the United States, in wars and rumors of wars, you better darn well build your military. Because in this season, if you let terrorists have atomic weapons, it won't be long because you misdiagnosed the season. And you're trying to create peace in a time of war, that you'll be speaking Arabic. But there's coming a season when the mountain of the house of the Lord will rise. Will teach people His ways, render decisions between many people. They'll go from destructive to constructive, and they'll never again train for war. How many of you know that if you were president in that day, which that isn't a day that's on us right now, but if you're president in that day, you have a whole different approach to the military. Because ideologies are winning battles. Your ability to make decisions, like someone would say, the pen is mightier than the sword. Your ability to make decisions, to be wise and make decisions in those days will be mightier than an atomic weapon. Because this will be like the days of Solomon. You know that Solomon never fought a war. Why? Because his wisdom astounded people. And they didn't want to be an enemy with him because he astounded them with his wisdom and insight. Even the Queen of Sheba came from a long ways away to hear of Solomon's wisdom. Why would you make war with a man who had the wisdom? So Solomon demonstrated end-time ministry, didn't he? David couldn't build a temple. Why? Because the temple is a permanent structure. He could have a tabernacle, the tabernacle of David, but he couldn't build a temple. Why? Because he was a man of war, and God doesn't want war to last forever. So He wouldn't let David build something permanent because it would have been a misuse of David's. See, David was supposed to be a man of war because he lived in a season of war. But God didn't want his season to be permanent. So He said, Solomon, Solomon. You understand? Shalom, related to shalom, place of peace, a man of peace. A man of peace could build my tabernacle because it's a permanent structure. I can't have a man of war building a permanent structure because war is not permanent. So the man of war can prepare for the man of peace. But I can't build a permanent structure with the man of war, even though he's a man after my heart. There's coming a Solomon season when God will build a permanent structure and never again will they train. He didn't say, and there will be a season where they don't train for war, did He? He didn't say that. He says, never again will they train for war. Are we there? No. What would I do if I was president? Build the strongest military I possibly could. Why? Because we're in wars and rumors of wars. But I would definitely be preparing for my son Solomon. I'd be preparing. I'd be building a military and teaching my son how to make peace, how to make decisions between many people.